Shabbat Shalom. It is so delightful to have all of these various smachot, these various joyous things to be able to celebrate. I'm also really enjoying watching all of the babies and children and grandchildren. We sort of read about returning the hearts of parents to children and children towards parents, and there's a lot of that just happening very organically in the room. It's lovely. So this is Shabbat HaGadol. It is the great Shabbat. It's sort of the culmination of all the other Shabbatot of the year and the Shabbat that leads us towards Passover. And so it's customary to say a few words about Pesach or about the Haggadah. And so I want to do that. It was the custom in the shtetl that the rabbi would actually deliver a very deep, in-depth halachic conversation about the kashrut of Pesach in a way that ideally would show off the rabbi's erudition and knowledge so that you couldn't follow a word of what the rabbi was saying. So I hope you'll forgive me for avoiding that particular tradition. But what I do want to talk about is the Seder itself, and particularly in the Haggadah, a challenge the Haggadah is reflecting, which is the way that it is for us to live in exile, to live in a world, to be a minority, to be dealing with relationships beyond the Jewish world. And I think the Haggadah has three suggestions of how we can understand that. But before I go into the Haggadah, I want to tell you two stories. So as you know, my family and I took a couple weeks vacation. We were down in New Zealand and Fiji, which in some ways is as far geographically as one can be, though not at all culturally, by the way. New Zealand felt very, California actually in a lot of ways. And while I was there, I was reading about, you may have followed in the news, in Canada, there were several really terrible incidents of anti-Semitism a couple weeks ago. And so, as many of us, I read the news, I didn't really think about it other than with great sadness. And then I remembered, oh my gosh, my friend Steve, some of you know Steve Wernick. He came here a couple times to speak. Steve Wernick is the senior rabbi of B'nai Tzedek, which is the largest congregation in Canada. So my thought was, oh no, Steve is having a terrible week. So I called Steve, which he was very grateful just that I reached out, say, I'm thinking of you. I know it's got to be a hard time. He's telling me the Canadian community is terrified. They've received information that there is an Iranian sleeper cell that may be active in Toronto that's planning a mass casualty event. And as if that were not bad enough, then he's talking first to the Toronto PD, and they say, we understand, we're aware of the threat, we're having an alert status about it, but it's not really our responsibility. This is something for the national security forces to be alerted to. So then he talks to the national security people, I forget the acronym, the equivalent of their kind of CIA efforts there. And they say, no, this is the Toronto Police's job because it's their job to maintain safety. So Steve's carrying this weight that every time he convenes a service or an event, that it's a target. He's now trying to raise a couple of $1 million to fix his own facility because it was built several decades before ours. You know the planters we have over there? Those big, thick planters? They were designed like that because they prevent the building from being rammed. If you look in the front, you'll see these big iron poles there, which were done in a very aesthetic way. I think it looks good. But the purpose of them, the reason it's like that, is to keep anybody from being able to smash a vehicle into our building, which was attempted in Detroit at a synagogue a couple weeks ago. So we're very fortunate. He's raised a couple $1 million to retrofit a synagogue like that, and he's engaging with other synagogues and trying to send letters and meet with politicians to convince them that they need to take this very seriously. That's story number one. Story number two is I have a dear friend that some of you have met, Josh Weisberg, who lives in Jerusalem, and his daughter got married just a couple weeks ago. So, and I don't know what you know about Israeli weddings. They don't give you a lot of warning. I really did want to go, but I only found out the wedding was happening. Well, I knew they were getting married 2 months ago, and I only found out the date of the wedding like February 20th, right? So it's like there's no way to even consider such a thing. So he sent me pictures, which is very lovely. So he sends me a beautiful picture of the bride. Terrific to see. I wish I could show you. I'll send maybe, whatever. I'd love to show people. Then he shows a picture of the bride and the groom, which of course my first thought, you can maybe guess my first thought? Oh my God, they're so young. They look like babies. Then he shows me the picture of the family stopping in the bomb shelter on the way over to the wedding hall. There were sirens as they were getting ready to go over. He shows me a beautiful picture of him and his daughter dancing at their wedding. I don't know if people know the country song. My friend loves country music. There's a song called I Loved Her First. It's a very corny song about a guy at his daughter's wedding sort of singing to the groom, like, I'm really glad you're here and I'm glad you love her, but remember, buddy, I loved her first. That's the gist of the song. And so Josh is dancing. I mean, it's like I'm crying, watch, it's beautiful. And then the last photo is, and now they look more relaxed, they're wearing jeans, whatever, the happy couple in their first time in the bomb shelter as a married couple. It's funny, but it's tragic. And so this is the world we're living in right now. I don't know what people remember. I mean, I'm younger than some of you and older than some of you. When I grew up, synagogues didn't have security in the United States. When I grew up, the old Kolamet was as open as it could be. What a beautiful intention, right? It was built so people would feel welcome. It was easy to find your way in. It frankly wasn't easy to find the offices, but that's a different conversation. But it was open to the world, and now we're kind of, behind a fence here because we need to be. We have a security committee, which is one of our best committees and to which I'm enormously grateful, and we need them and they keep us safe. And we spend a significant part of our budget on security to protect ourselves. We didn't need any of that even 10, 12 years ago. I remember traveling, my grandparents, can I tell you a third story? My grandparents sent me on one of these trips to Europe when I graduated from high school, like 30 days, 25 capitals, whatever. And I had a great time. I don't think they really knew what they were sending me on, but you can ask me about that separately. But as you know, in these trips, you go to a gazillion churches. And the churches are beautiful. They're architectural masterpieces, but I will admit at a certain point, I'm like, I just cannot see another church. Can I please see a synagogue already? So I skipped out on the trip for a little bit. I mean, I told the guides, whatever, and I have somebody else on the trip with me accompany me, and we're going to go look and go see if we could find some synagogues. And we couldn't get in. Because, keep in mind, I was 17 years old at the time, so I didn't really think to check. But it didn't occur to me as an American Jew that there would be an issue. I'm walking into all these churches at any time of day. It's no problem. You go to the synagogue, there's a gate and a barrier, and you have to call and make an appointment, which is very reasonable. And it turns out, by the way, and then in the next city, I called, I made an appointment. If you call and you say, listen, I'm a 17-year-old tourist from the United States, I'm an American Jew, I just want to see a synagogue, they're like, no, thank you. And we're a little bit like that now. A lot like that now. I mean, it's changed, and it's horrifying. So the Haggadah is trying to ask the question of how do we make sense of this unsettled quality we sometimes have living in the world? So it has, I think, 3 responses, and I'm curious what you think of each one. I'm not going in the particular order of the Haggadah, but I'm going in reverse historical order, meaning the most recent of the passages to the most old of the passages. Because one of the things we don't notice in the Haggadah, it's a multi-layered document put together over generations, but it's worth unpeeling when things were put in. So this one, perhaps people know, it comes from the words of Jeremiah after the destruction of the first temple. Pour out your wrath, shvo chamatcha el hagoyim, pour out your wrath upon the nations that know you not, and upon the kingdoms that call not upon your name. They have consumed Jacob and laid waste his habitation. Pour out your wrath upon them and let your fury overtake them. Pursue them in anger and destroy them from under the heavens of the eternal. It's pretty angry. And it got repurposed. Its first appearance in an Ashkenazi Haggadah, in any Haggadah, was Machzor Vitri, which is a 12th century document. So sometime around the 11th, 12th century, it became part of our liturgy. By the way, what was happening in the 11th and 12th century in Europe? That would be the Crusades. Right, so this is almost certainly a direct response to the Crusades and the massacres of Jews that occurred in the Rhineland and elsewhere, that it then became, pour out your wrath upon these Christians who are assaulting and attacking us. So I'm curious what people think of that paragraph. Should we leave it in? Should we read it? What is that something you want to be expressing? Mordechai, and then I'll walk over to Dave.
Just want to say that ironically, it's when we open the door for Elijah.
It's the moment we open the door for Elijah, praying for redemption from this mess.
It's important to note whom we are asking to take action. We're not asking that we take revenge. We're asking that God do justice to the wrongdoers. That is what brings redemption.
Great, so it's key to notice, and I think this matters of how we understand the paragraph. The paragraph is said in the 12th century by Jews who live in Europe, and here's things they don't have. They don't have F-16s, and they don't have an organized military of any sort, and the kings and princelings of that era kept effective weapons out of the hands of anybody other than their knights. So they had sort of self-defense forces, but that was really it. So this reads very differently in the 11th century than when you read it today, because it's really calling for God to notice our oppression and do something about it. It's not taking power into our own hands. I think that's a very key observation. Does anybody here, how many people read it at their Seder, if I can ask? How many people don't read it? We have a kind of love-hate relationship with it. We read it some years and don't. I often give it as a homework assignment that people can choose whether they want to read it or not, because it does have an anger around it. I taught this yesterday also at Moldau, and it was interesting that a couple people, Betty Adler had this reaction, Janice. So I know they're close friends. Betty said, no, we should say it. She said, we haven't said it before, but this year we should say it because I'm so angry at what things are like right now, and I need to give that some expression. All right, so that's number one. Number two, people perhaps know the paragraph of V'hisha Amda. There's a nice melody, V'hisha Amda, V'hisha, right? God stood up for us because in every generation they arise to destroy us. Right, we say in every generation they arise to destroy us. I'm curious again, how do people react to that one? Is that helpful? Is it not helpful? Why is that in there? Sorry? It's factual. I'm going to push back in a minute, but okay, it's factual. What? Oh, go ahead. I'll come to Naomi. I promise I'll come to you, Naomi. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble later.
Every year that we read it, I would read it and say, except this generation. And for the last 2 years, you can't say that.
When I was growing up, it was when Israel was established and felt very safe. And I think now my generation is in a new moment of realizing we're maybe not as safe as we thought. But I think it's important to have that of like, come close to your community. There is God, there is hope here.
Nice.
I'm going to push back on my good friend, say that when I was growing up, Israel was under attack multiple times. And I still remember as a little fellow, 17, watching the news every night. They said, and the armies are amassing. This is in 1967. And so in my generation, it was threatened. And we moved on to the safe generation. So it feels like in every generation or every other generation, we've got to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, right, when Naomi was born, I mean, think about the late 90s, early 2000s, it felt very different than it does right now.
You want something else? He wanted to say he loves Israel.
Thank you for saying that.
I just see it as very hopeful and a point of pride that while we do face these adversities and challenges and people trying to destroy us, that we're still here.
So I just want to, go ahead, David. I got to do something differently about this. I'm getting a workout every Shabbat this way.
It ends with V'hakadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam, that God, maybe it's God who gave us this army that we can oppose our enemies with.
Yeah, it ends, I mean, again, it's similar to what David Mary Levy was saying, that it ends with God is the one who's saving us from their hands. I just want to make one observation about this paragraph. It can mislead. It says, in every generation they arose to destroy us, and sometimes it feels that way. But if you look at Jewish history, this is where I might just slightly differ with you, Erica, if you'll forgive me. I don't want to differ with the Kala. If you look at Jewish history, it is periods of golden age and vast stability that are interposed by moments of crisis and dislocation. There are hundreds of years of thriving, and then there are these punctuations of tremendous challenge that last maybe a decade or maybe a generation. I mean, it's remarkable, actually, when you look. We've been around so long as a people. I mean, almost no one else has this kind of historical memory of their existence, that we can trace a lot of challenges and difficulties, and especially in the West, where we've always been the quintessential other that has received this kind of vitriol and hatred. It's easy to see it as a story of suffering, but I don't want to lose, I want to say it, I'm going to say Vehisha Amda, and we need it especially this year. But somehow we need to counterbalance just a little bit to remember it's not like that all the time. And while it is true that we need the security barrier, and we need Michael, Michael's our security guide, and he's so lovely, and we need our security committee, it's also true that we have way more friends in this neighborhood than we have enemies. It's way more people in the United States who are positive. I mean, for those who think about these things at all, and let's be honest, right? Quick aside, I had my cousins over. We got back from our trip. We had Carol's cousins over. We wanted to show them some pictures and chat. We're chatting about whatever, this and that. I say, oh my gosh, Canada's such a mess. And they're like, what do you mean? These are informed, educated people. What do you mean? Oh, there's all these anti-Semitic incidents. Canada's having, really? I didn't even know that. So for those who even think about it, we have many more friends than enemies. The enemies are scary. We need to, even a few is really bad. But I don't want us to lose sight of that. Can I move to the third? Okay.
Unlike your friend in Canada who had called different security services to be frustrated, we did not call the Palo Alto police. They called us. They called us and said, we're concerned about you, and as a result, we are going to have more patrols in your area. So we don't even have to, we have so many friends, they come to us. Sorry, Rabbi.
No, I think that's really important to recognize.
We do have years and years of peace, but what's interesting is the crises and hatred always comes back. It always does, if you look at our history.
Right, there does seem to be a recurrent pattern here that.
Okay, since it's wandering around, okay, back to the original story of the Exodus. Malach HaMaves is out there killing people left and right, and God saves us because of our act of sacrificing the lamb and putting the blood on the doorposts and the lintel. And that's because God is saving us from the Egyptians who were trying to destroy us. And the whole theme from beginning to end of the Seder is recurring danger and God rescuing us, and finally us saying, come on, God, do it already. And I think it's really important during times of security to have that reminder.
The Musaf that we say on this Pesach, not this Pesach, but that we will say on Pesach and this Shalosh Regalim, there's a line that is coming up for me, which is Mipnei Chataenu Galinu Me'atzenu. And so our tradition also understands that we have a part both in our destruction and in our Geula and in our redemption. We have a part.
Right, we don't want to forget our agency in all of this. So I'd like to move to the last one, is that okay, Maury? All right. So the last one needs just a little bit of explanation. The Haggadah, in its original formulation, is in part an anti-Christian polemic. Okay, there are several instances and examples of that, but the most, what's the word for bolate? The most clear example is the way we describe the rituals right before dinner, right? So as we're getting close, you can smell the matzah ball soup already. And then we say, okay, here's what the Pesach means, here's what the matzah means, here's what the maror means. There is no other time in Jewish liturgy that we say, here's why we're doing what we're doing. We hit Sukkot with lulav and etrogim, where if anywhere you would want to say, here's why, we just do it. This is the only time where we say, here's the reason we do it. So why are they saying that? Because somebody else was saying, no, these symbols mean a new thing. They're reacting to the Gospels, right? These symbols are being repurposed, so the Jewish people are saying, no, here's what they really mean, right? Don't lose track of our meaning associated with them. I think that's what's going on there. And there are several passages that suggest this concern with a Christian community beginning to adopt and use in its own ways this language and symbolism, and the rabbis trying to push back. So that leads to the following paragraph. Vayotzienu Adonai miMitzrayim, God brought us out of Egypt. Maybe you know this one. Lo al yedei malach, V'lo al yedei saraf, v'lo al yedei shaliach, right? God brought us out not by an angel, not by a seraph, not by a messenger, ela kadosh baruch hu bichvodo uva'atzmo, but God's self, with all of his glory. So first of all, what is the obvious factual problem with this paragraph? What? So first of all, we got Malach HaMavet. Actually, the angel of death plays a key role in the story. That's true. And who else plays a key role in the story? That'd be Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Who is God's agent and messenger specifically appointed in Exodus 3 and 4? That would be Moshe. Okay, as many of you know, how many times is Moses mentioned in the Haggadah? Yeah, once, but in a kind of backwards way in a verse that they couldn't avoid. There's like no way to pull Moses' name out of it. They're intentionally erasing Moses from the Haggadah. Why? Yeah, again, I believe it to be an anti-Christian polemic, meaning no, there's no mention. God's acting in the world. It's not some kind of special holy person. So they're reacting a little bit to what's around them. But what I like about the reaction, what feels very profound to me, is it's not that it's hidden, but it's talking positively about who we are. It's not saying what we're not, or it's not expressing anger, and it's not drawing attention to oppression. It's identifying who we are and what these symbols mean. We believe that God can act through us in the world. And I think by saying there was no messenger, it is as if to say Moses not only acted for God, but really God and Moses acted together. And when we look and we tell what these symbols mean, they're telling us that there's a possibility of hope in a world that can sometimes be broken. When we hold up the matzah and we say, this is the bread of redemption, we're noticing that that bread changed from being the bread of affliction and poverty to being the bread of freedom and hope. And that's an amazing transformation that took place over the course of our Seder. And it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's who we are. That we are a people who believe that when we act in partnership with God, we have tremendous agency and we can make the world around us a much better place, not just for the Jews, but for everyone. That's who we are as a people. And I feel like the strongest and oldest response to what it means to live in a non-Jewish world is to double down on who we are and our faith, to reconnect with our practices, to eat the matzah and the maror and at least talk about the Pesach, whatever, we don't really eat that anymore, to double down on the rituals. I mean, think how many practices and rituals there are in the Seder. Most celebrated Jewish practice of the Jewish year is Passover Seder. It eclipsed Yom Kippur about 12 years ago. Used to be Yom Kippur, now it's the Seder. Right? We love the Seder because we recognize there's something in these practices and in its message that we desperately, desperately need. So look, we live in very unsettled and frightening times. And I don't want us to lose hope or lose sight of who we are. It's so easy to focus on the risks and the fears and the hatreds that's directed towards us that we lose sight of our own mission and purpose. And when we do that, we're not only blinded to our friends and allies, the non-Jews in the world who care about us and love us, the police departments that proactively reach out, but we also lose sight of the whole point of why we're doing this and why it matters. We are saying that we are a people who believes that God is God and no king, president, or ruler or anybody else is God. And people throughout history have really not wanted to hear it. And we have said that we believe in the possibility of redemption and hope that the world can change for the better, that the systems of oppression and persecution that surround us are not hardwired, but that we have ability to influence and affect them. And historically, people have not wanted to hear it. And we have been made the quintessential other in the West. That's not really something we did, that's something was done to us. But we are who we are, and despite that label, we persist in wanting to be unique and special and beautiful, a treasured people. So I wish all of us a meaningful Seder, and I hope that we can reconnect with that message of faith in a very deep way, because then not only does great hope spring from that, but I think it will illuminate for us what we need to be doing in these troubled and difficult times. Shabbat Shalom.